And I think maybe it should be like, how are you going to cling desperately to summer? What's your strategy? I'm going to be at the beach in the rain. I think that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Because we are staring down September, which is crazy. Jay's ready for scarves. Okay. I hear you. Give people one more minute. What was that, Eva?
I just was giving Maurice's answer a shout out.
Good afternoon.
All right, should we get started? All right, hi everyone, welcome back. We're gonna start with our public health update and our case numbers, and then hear a little bit from Pascal about the applications to the Arts and Culture COVID Relief Fund for organizations, and then have a conversation for the rest of our time about the new Starlight space in Central Square. So to just kick us off, as of August 27th, there are 15,374 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Boston residents. 11,727 of those have fully recovered, and there have been no additional deaths. And just to add a little bit about some of the trends that have been coming up in the public health numbers, the 7-day average positive test rate was 2.3, down from 2.7 a week earlier. That's one of those key health metrics that the city's keeping track of, wanting to see that below 2.5%. The cumulative positive test rate is down to around 10%. And there are higher new case numbers in recent weeks due in part to significant increase in testing. So we're now up to an average of 2,028 tests per day. And that's another 10% increase week over week, and more than double of what we were doing earlier in the summer. The city's mobile testing team is at Jubilee Christian Church in Mattapan through tomorrow, Saturday, August 29th. It's free and open to anyone, regardless of symptoms. And looking at a neighborhood level, last week, every neighborhood except one had a positive test rate at or below 3.5%. So the exception to that, which has been the story for some time now, is East Boston, which last week was up to a positive test rate around 11.4%. So the rate in East Boston has been consistently higher than that of the rest of the city. And East Boston does have high rates of multi-generational housing, more crowded housing, and breadwinners who can only work outside the home. So this is, of course, an equity issue, and the city is bringing its resources and partnerships to this, which includes the COVID-19 Health Inequities Task Force, outreach partnerships, including with the Greater Boston Latino Network, the Boston Immigrant COVID-19 Collaborative, and financial support from the Boston Resiliency Fund. So the mobile test team, after being in Mattapan, is going to be moving to East Boston starting on Tuesday, September 1st. This is in addition to a testing site already in East Boston at the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, which will continue to offer tests to anyone who wants one, regardless of symptoms and at no cost. The mayor also announced an action plan that has been launched to work with the East Boston community on strategies to reduce the spread of the virus. So as I think a lot of us already know, this is a lot about communications and language access, in particular, making it clear that anyone can get tested regardless of immigration status. So no information is going to be asked about status as a part of testing, and that's one of the messages that we're trying to get out there. If these case numbers don't come down, the city is going to look at tightening regulations around gatherings in public spaces. but of course we don't want to get to that point. So we're really just seeing a shift right now to focus on East Boston and bring that percentage down. Shifting gears, one of the things that we've been working on and having a lot of conversations across city departments about is really thinking about what is community engagement and what do our services look like in this digital world that we're now finding ourselves in, and who is being left out as everything moves online. So I do want to highlight what the library has been working on to address the digital divide in Boston. And I don't know if David Leonard is on, but if you are on, David, feel free to chime in. This week, BPL launched an outdoor Wi-Fi program that will provide free socially distanced internet access 24 hours a day in public space around 9 BPL branches. And those branches were chosen based on data reflecting at-home broadband access, household income, and the availability of outdoor seating. BPL is also offering public computer access. So people can now sign up to use computers at no cost in a socially distanced space in the Central Library in Copley Square, which is the only kind of publicly accessible service that's now being offered inside the library. And that's going to be available through 2-hour time slots, Monday through Thursday. And I'll share the link in the chat. And these are both resources that I think are just really important to share. The Wi-Fi kind of expansion into public space, I think, is really interesting. If anybody has like physical space that they operate where they can provide that, we're just seeing, whether it's older adults or youth or people for whom English is not a first language, access to the internet and access to devices that can do things like join Zoom calls is a huge issue right now. And there's people who are just not getting any of our services or who can participate in a lot of the programs that we're now putting online and that you all are putting online. So it'll be interesting to see how the city continues to try to address this. There is a task force, I think, that's just focusing on this explicitly. So we'll keep sharing updates with you all. Yes, and of course, people who are homeless and don't have access to a space where they have a computer set up. So I think those are all of my updates for right now. The last thing I just wanted to say was just to give a shout out to Boston Lyric Opera for receiving a Boston Resiliency Fund grant to work with their costume shop partner CostumeWorks to produce over 1,800 lip reading friendly clear front face masks to support Boston's deaf and hard of hearing communities. And this is in partnership with the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities. So it's really great and exciting to see that. It's so good to see an arts organization partnering with the Disabilities Commission, who are just really great people working often behind the scenes without a lot of visibility sometimes. So just great work and excited to see what comes out of it. So I think that is it for me. And now I'll pass it to Pascal.
Thanks, Cara. Next slide, Christina. Thanks. So as Cara mentioned, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we noticed and saw from the applications for the COVID-19 fund. The biggest thing that we noticed that most people mentioned they would use this grant funding for would be for PPE for staff, as well as for COVID-19 space accommodation. So that's social distance markers, signs, partitions, hand sanitizers, cleaning supplies for cleaning equipment, as well as the biggest thing that we noticed that people were really interested in using this grant and funding for was, of course, to pivot to a virtual content. So that meant purchasing better technology, upgrading technology people may have had, or if they've never had any kind of technology that they needed to move into this sphere. And especially for our organizations that provide some kind of educational service, a lot of organizations are looking to provide these services for free. So a lot of the funding, they hope to go to that. And now that we are mostly moving into a virtual world for the foreseeable time, a lot of people mentioned their need to use social media and marketing efforts in order not only to connect with their audience, but as well as expanding their audience, especially including BIPOC communities, and pay for their artists and staff, as well as rent relief and creating accessibility accommodations for any virtual content that they may be creating. Majority of the organizations who did apply did not own or operate a space. The few that did express their need to use the funding for either rent relief or in order to offset any cost of operating space. Next slide. one of the things that we wanted to really take stock of in all these applications were the number of BIPOC and ALANA organizations. For those of you who are not familiar, because there are a lot of acronyms going around now, BIPOC and or ALANA organizations are arts and culture organizations that have a combination of the following characteristics: serving communities of color, predominantly employing arts workers of color, led by a person or people of color, and or presenting work by artists of color. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, while ALANA stands for African, Latinx, Asian, Arab, and Native American. Our offices use both of these terms as much as we can so that we can be inclusive of all non-white identities. Out of the 148 applications that we received, 57 applicants identified themselves as BIPOC or ALANA, 67 were not. 22 applicants were unsure if their organization were BIPOC, ALANA, or served that community, and 3 applicants preferred not to identify themselves. So these are just a few of the things that we have been taking stock of through these through our applications. And for those organizations on the call today who applied and received an MOU, your grants are being processed, so please return that signed MOU to us. Payments will take up to 2 weeks, and please be sure to enter the address you entered for your city vendor ID. That is where your check will be sent to. So we're really asking you all to double check that. Eva asks, have grant recipients for the COVID-19 fund been announced yet? Cara?
Grantees have received award letters, and we should be making an official press release announcement, I think next week, Christina, is that right? Early next week, so you will know soon.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Cara. Great. So so that's what we have been doing so far. If anybody has questions or if there's anything else people need to know a little bit about either processing your payment or trying to figure out where your vendor ID is or what that address is, please feel free to leave a question in the chat and or email me, and we can get you that information as soon as possible. Next slide, please. All right, and now we're going to take a moment to talk about the Starlight Square. We have today Catherine Carr-Kelly from the Central Square Theater, Maurice Emmanuel Parent from Front Porch Arts Collective, and Peter DeMiro from the Dance Complex. I have just a few questions to start our conversation, but the real thing that we really want to know, and I imagine other organizations on this call want to know, is just how's it going? I know you all are going into your second week, and then there's Front Porch will be doing next week cabarets. So there seems to be a lot of excitement around it. And really we want to hear from you all how the event has been going. What are some challenges you're experiencing, things that you've had to adjust as we are in this time of creating events and engaging our audience during COVID-19. So whoever wants to jump right in, please feel free to unmute yourself and we'll go from there.
I will, I guess. Hi, guys. Hi, partners. Thanks for having us so much. We appreciate it. It's been fabulous. Starlight was put together in really a 3-month period where about over $500,000 were raised to create Starlight. And then additional funds were raised to make sure that all of our programming was free. So far in, it looks like about around 750 people have participated in either an event, a class, a community performance, the things that we've been having. But it's only been 2 weeks, so we're in our, is that right? We're in our 3rd week. Yes, our 3rd week. I think it's kind of amazing, even to myself, when I think about it, that, you know, this Place for Cars is basically now a place that holds theater, music, dance, classes, film, drag shows, community space, church services. It's kind of awesome. You want to add to that? I was thinking about, Peter, how you were saying, I think I read something, or maybe you said it to me, something about how audiences feel coming in. So we started at, we started at 100 people the day that we did our ribbon cutting, and then 2 hours later we were down to 50. so it goes.
And thanks, Catherine, for kind of setting answering all the questions. So now we can just riff off of you. Thank you. I appreciate it. because it's Friday. I would say that lots of other wonderful moments in it. Tonight is the first official dance thing that's happening in there, and just a shout out to all our partners, those on the call and those community partners. I think we're finding ways to, even in the short amount of time it took to put this together, it's almost like let's put on a show in the rowboat that's next to the Titanic. And I hate that sounds so morbid, but that show is going to play that rowboat really, really well. And it means that we've been collaborating quickly and collaborating well. And I think sometimes in our normal lives, it just takes so long for that kind of stuff to bubble up because, procedures get in the way and institutional crap gets in the way. It has been amazing to work with Catherine and her team, who have taken on the operations of the box office and the ticket selling, even the dip jar as we come into the place, so that there's kind of a very a produced theater wing that's kind of helping all of this chug along, so that when Boston Improv comes in or we come in, there's a system that we're not worrying about. And so we're very grateful for that. I would say as far as content goes, the collaboration, sure, could be deeper. We talked in the beginning of let's put dance and church services together and let's do some wonderful collaborations. I think in a future incarnation we'd be able to do that, but the amount of the ability for us to get where we are right now in such a short amount of time and benefit each other, I think is really good. Program-wise, I will say that for us at the Dance Complex, it is really hard for us to find presenting money, and I try to shake those trees. This has offered us to do in 67 days of the arc of time from when we show dance to the end of it, beginning of it to the end of it. We're recreating our whole season from September to June in this 67 days, and for us that's quite a stretch. But it also feels like monumental that we're able to do this now in this time. So we're really grateful for that, and grateful to the artists. We're able to bring on curators for the first time and pay curators to help program and bring Black Dance Boston, a program we've had in the back of our minds forever, to the forefront. Bring back Racine's Black Dance Festival, bring one night we have to rotate the choreographers off stage or the dancers off stage, and because we can only have 50 people in the thing, but it's an evening of tiny and short dances, which brings many more choreographers to the space than we could otherwise. So we're very grateful for all of that. And I've spoken too long. Maurice.
You spoke just as long as you needed to. It's great,
Thank you.
And just to kind of riff off what you're saying, is one of the organizations that Central Square Theater has curated to do their lineup. It morphed into a very personal experience, but and I'll get into that. But when Kathy, we're in residence at Central Square, so we talk often. Kathy was like, we're doing this thing at Starlight, and we'd love for the Porch to put something together. The first thing I thought was, what is something that could like highlight artists that are in the Porch family that would lead itself to maximum distancing? So I was like, all right, solo something, and something that would add value to anyone who would come and witness it, and also like to give the artist a platform to make whatever statements, and also put some money in their pockets, to be blunt. And then we have a completely most of the cast, all are people of the African diaspora, and everybody involved is a Black or brown person. And I'm trying not to get emotional, but like the horrors that lots of BIPOC, particularly Black folks, are feeling within this past week, became intensely personal to be able to create something beautiful and safe with people that look like me. And I didn't realize how healing that would be. And it is, and even though it's still completely virtual, the way it's structured is all the rehearsals and all the conversation happen via Zoom. And then the only time the artists are really in the space is maybe a couple hours before they sing. And then they're on PPE fully until they get to like their spot on stage, take it off, do their thing, and then put it back on and leave. And there are tons of safety protocols that are laid out in the contracts. We want to thank Actors Equity, who's been in conversation mostly with Kathy for a very long time, developing this contract and the protocols. And one of the things that Central Square put on Front Street from the beginning is all the folks who they've curated to perform are going to be able to, so it's free to the audience, so it's not revenue generating, so the only revenue will be through donations, and each curated group is going to keep those donations as some type of profit. And the porch is going to be able to do like a profit sharing if donations can be seen as profit, so with every artist, so on top of their fee, which is a good fee for even like a week-long performance, they're also going to get things that are donated from the public. So I'm just really excited to be able to gather this. We had a whole range of responses from artists, because I was curious that it was cool to kind of put this out there to artists in a really open and free conversation, and welcome people's concerns and how they are in this moment. So we had everything from a person who I sent the email in 20 minutes, and the email explained all the safety protocols. And in 20 minutes, they said, yes, I've been wanting to perform, I'm itching to perform, and I'm ready to share. And I have a full designed one-person show I'm ready to share with the world. I'm like, amen, let's go. All the way to some artists who, in conversation, they were like, this is not something I feel completely comfortable with given my situation. I said, I completely understand. And, they happen to have small children and didn't feel comfortable. Even though having read the safety protocols, I was like, no harm, no foul. In fact, let's just promise that this means we'll work together in the future. So, and we stay in conversation with everybody about their testing and about the safety protocols, again, about the way they're rehearsing virtually and the statements they want to make. So, again, not to be so personal, but it turned out being exactly what I, as an artist, needed to be involved in, given this time. And I'm just thank you all for listening to my little notes. I went off topic a little bit, but I didn't mean to get so personal. But
You're
you can't
totally
help it these
fine.
days.
Of course, it's
Oh,
important.
yeah.
That's why we do the art, right? Like, it's imperative to what we do. Thank you, all three of you, for sharing that. I'd love if each of you, or whoever feels comfortable, talk a little bit about, what were some of the, I guess one of the things that we're interested in is giving people some advice or tips of moving forward and creating events outside or like this. And with, Catherine, you spoke about having to go from 100 audience members to 50. What were some of the things that you all had to do, or what were things you wish you had thought of or had done beforehand to make that transition a little smoother? Or if there are any like advice or things you'd love to impart on us in this moment about that.
Sure. I mean, I think a few things. One, I think that, if we had had more time to consider things prior to opening, then we would make deeper connections to the neighborhood. So we've actually applied for an NEA Our Town grant, so that we can next year do all this community programming. So that part will be a very different experience. I think we're offering things that the neighborhood likes clearly and wants, but it's not the same as working with the neighborhood on things. So I think having that balance will be really important. Again, we didn't have that long to put it all together. So given the crisis, that didn't happen as much as we would have liked. I think so even doing free shows, you have to RSVP for contact tracing. So we leave some tickets for walk-up and some for RSVP, and usually the RSVPs get taken up right away because there's not that many. And then I think there's some concern about walk-up. Of course, do I want to? I mean, there's concern, without COVID, do I want to walk up and maybe not get in, right? But now it's like add COVID to that, and people are like, I don't know that I want to do that. So that's a concern. They're free events, so not everyone who RSVPs shows up, although we're working on sort of all these ways to like gently confirm that they're going to come. So that, I think that's a bit of a because of COVID, that's maybe more of a concern than we might have had before. Yeah, and of course, safety. I mean, safety is the number one priority. We, luckily we collaborated, and we still collaborate on safety. So, we have these safety protocols, they're on the website. We have a social contract, we have protocols for the audience and for the artists. It's open to everyone. We get all kinds of feedback on it. It's been super helpful to help us look at things and say like, oh yeah, that's a good point. We've had medical experts work with us. We learn things new every day, about how we could do things differently. So that kind of collaboration on like serious, the health and safety pact that we have to have with each other, I think has been really excellent. And I would say if you're going to do something in this time, getting that stuff out, feel free to borrow whatever of ours you want, getting that stuff out early and often, and then having conversations about them, that's really critical.
Yeah, I might add to that and just like Maurice had said too, it's like conversations that might just be, casual before COVID, they become really important because people's safety isn't, and so you're collaborating with your partners differently, collaborating with potential actors and dancers differently, more carefully, and it reminds me of land acknowledgement, like we're going backwards and we're not assuming anything, and when we do assume something, then you realize, oh, we got to go backwards a little bit with that. We had some dancers pull out too last minute, and you had to respect the fact that this was just a unique situation. An aspect of this that I think has been fascinating for me is to watch the city of Cambridge, the Business Improvement District, Central Square Business Improvement District, of which Mike Monestein, many of he's a great visionary, and this had been planned as a smaller event, a smaller kind of square, mostly for distant social gathering before COVID, for gathering, and then it blew into something more. But what I'm hopeful that the seeds are planted for is the relationship between the businesses and arts, in the way that we're not always begging for money and, oh, give the lowly arts, we need you businesses. I think it flips the conversation a lot to say that because of Starlight, people are coming to that square now, and the restaurants are saying, oh, I see an uptick in business. People come for a cocktail on the patio, which was also part of the bids stuff. So that all of a sudden you're working hand in hand. And I'm just relieved to not yet once again be looked at as begging for money because the hard value is somewhere else or perceived to be somewhere else, when we know, all of us on this call know, that we drive economies, and so that's been really a good thing happening, and a seed planted for future too.
Maurice, anything you want to add about any challenges or things you've experienced, or just what you've noticed since, the front porch will start next week. So if there's anything in that, or you want to, give us some more plug about it too.
Yeah, well, I give a solid plug. It's 5 amazing artists, folks that people know from the stage when we could gather in such places safely. It starts with Cherie Dunwell, then there's Carolyn Saxon, Davron Monroe, Dwayne Mitchell, and Cheryl Singleton. And I think, if I'm to be honest, one of the challenges that we are still working out, we have a meeting in half an hour with everyone via Zoom, is the amount of responsibility each performer has to take because of the safety protocols and because of the world we live in. Like in the just the realities of COVID. One issue we're having is making sure everyone can get tested, and the union has mandated that their negative test result has to be received 48 hours before they perform, but none of the testing options, if you're doing asymptomatic testing, A, it's hard to get an appointment, and B, there's no consistent turnaround time on when you get the results. So somebody might get it before, or, God forbid if someone gets it after, and if they don't get it by the time they perform, they can't, the show is canceled. So they've actually had to, the performers and all the artists involved have had to, with the guidance of Central Square, make their own appointments, go and get tested. One person was going to get tested at the retirement center down the street from her. And I don't like to put that much responsibility on the artist. As a leader, I would rather be able to have some type of infrastructure built that they can just easily access what they need, but there's been a lot of onus. And this process is not common to most artistic processes or theatrical processes. And I just it's a tribute to the spirit of the artists gathered, how signed on and how committed they are to making this happen. So I think that's probably the biggest thing on the front of my mind.
Yeah, and they have to quarantine from the time they take the test until they perform. So it's a lot to ask, you know?
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's what's important to understand, just the different protocols that we all have to start thinking about in terms of putting these events on, and what are the responsibilities, not only on the leadership, but the artists that we're hiring and staff members. Thank you so much for sharing that. I truly appreciate it. If anybody has questions for Maurice, Peter, Catherine, please feel free to add them into the chat. Anything else, Catherine, Peter, Maurice, you want to mention or share with us, or plug, or make sure that we know about, if there's something we should definitely see?
Well, all of it, every single bit of it. I was thinking earlier today that opening tonight, we are taping everything, and this is something that's came up when we were talking about Wi-Fi earlier and access. We don't have in place the ability to live stream, which when things got shrunk up size-wise, it's just so much to do, and we don't have solid Wi-Fi in that part of Central Square. But I believe we're taping all of our stuff, and I know there's different rules for theater than it's dance. But if you can't make it in, these things will reappear, and I think it'll be really great to see. There is a feeling, as Catherine mentioned, sitting in the audience that first night was really unworldly, because you're close to people watching an experience. You can see them from the neck down. It's so exciting, and so other than the Zoom thing from the neck up, and it feels like we're in new relationships again.
I have a question that I don't know. I'm not sure if everyone can kind of answer a piece of this or not, but I'm just curious about the origins of this and the funding and support. So kind of how is it from the beginning? I think the Central Square bid really, this is my impression, you guys can correct me. I wish we had Michael on to just kind of explain from his perspective too, but what was really the impetus and the driving factor? Like the city, I think, pitched in some support once the bid had already really thrown in some financial support, and the city support started with like, here's the space, you can use it. And then became, I think, financial support. And so I think probably all of us are interested in what would it look like to repeat something like this, right? And how do you build some of the will and support for it? And of course, like Boston is in a different situation in terms of our kind of approach to not gathering, and like the city support around not gathering, right? Like no city events or city buildings. We can't have community meetings. Like we're being very strict about that. But as we look ahead to next year or think about the next season, like, what does it look like to piece this together? And even now, as there's fundraising continuing, how does that work? Like, who's holding the majority of the work, and how are they raising funds for that in addition to supporting all of these other organizations?
Right.
Catherine, do you
Sure.
start that, and
I'll start that. So the city's given technical support. So an executive order made it be able to happen so quickly, because there's actually Cambridge has a really long process for permitting something like this, typically. Allowing all the permitting for the parking lot. They did donate some money that was coming to the cultural district for programming. So a significant amount of the city money helps us make everything free. The rest of the funds have come from a lot of corporate money. So the bid being the business owners in the area have given, MIT, etc. A lot of construction companies. So the money's come from a bunch of different places. And it's been challenging. I mean, Michael will say that I think he's still raising money. That it was challenging to raise that much money as quickly as he did. And also, I think about 250 people from just individuals from the campaign raise money too. And that was maybe a month before we opened, if that, again, super fast. So, so it's been a combination of things, but again, I think it's a challenge. Fundraising in New England is, as we all know, is a challenge. And this has been that too. I think without the city support, it never would have happened, obviously.
And I think being a smaller place than Boston, I think that helps a lot, because then you walk up the street and you really literally knock on Louis' door, the city manager, and that structure in City Hall is very different than most cities. And many counselors going to bat for the project. I think there's this kind of a democratic process in that, so that helps. And it also sometimes hinders, because we're working on this in Cambridge, the systemic support for the arts all the way through, all the time. So we need more of that, and we'll get more of that. But I think something like this, the vision of this, I mean, it's pretty beautiful. I mean, if you haven't seen pictures, it's like, geez, I want to be there and be involved with that. So it's charismatic, and it's sexy looking, and we know how youth is with things. As we grow older, we need systems to support it. So I think a lot of us in the arts community over there are working towards that as well, so that funding is more regular, so that when there's a really great vision like this, it's not so much work to do it. That's the hope, at least, on all this.
We did just get a question. Catherine, Peter, and Maurice, how do you see this evolving as the weather gets cooler? Any idea how long we'll keep the program going?
Yeah, we're scheduled through the end of October. As a dancer, I once danced when it was so cold, steam rose from my feet. So I'm expecting the same. No, we haven't talked about space heaters or anything like that within it, but I think people are really jazzed as long as it's safe to perform. But I don't know if Equity has different rules, Maurice or Catherine.
Well, the front porch programming is only next week.
Oh, good. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so far, unless we continue until December, then.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what the union would have to say about the cold. That's an interesting. So the porch is the 4th contract that the union has signed in the nation, which is huge. So.
And the only Black theater company, I believe.
Absolutely.
I don't think I realized that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have to put in Catherine has worked, we've all worked hard, but Catherine, I mean, dealing with the institution, of Equity and all the other, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And we've all followed suit. We relied on Dance USA, the lobbying organization for dance in this country, on their guidelines a lot, but they're just guidelines. And Actors Equity, I know, put the theater groups in much more stringent, and we followed that because I think people need to feel safe. So I bow to you.
No, I second the bowing.
Great. Thank you all so much. We're going to move on to the next slide. Catherine, Peter, and Maurice will be here until the end. So if people have questions, feel free to keep them going. One piece of advocacy we want everyone to just put their eyes on is this event happening next Tuesday, September 1st. It's called RedAlert. On September 1st, hashtag We Make Events, a coalition of trade bodies, businesses, unions, and live events workers will light up their venues, homes, and cities red in over 1,500 locations across North America to raise public and media awareness in support of the live events sector. If you want to help and provide some support, you can share your story about what live events mean to you. Post on your social media with the hashtag We Make Events, hashtag Red Alert Restart, and extend PUA, which is the unemployment. And then you can also write to your local congressional leaders. I think I'll put the link into the chat. And if you want to follow the information of the organization We Make Events, Christina has just put the link in the chat so you can look there. And they also ask if you want, you can light up your home, porch, apartment, and share some pictures on social media. We also Christine, if you could put the link for the Mass Creative info, as Mass Creative is also emphasizing and amplifying this event and advocacy. And if you have any questions, feel free to go to those links. I will also be sending the PowerPoint out after, so those will have the links in the PowerPoint as well. Awesome. I think that's our last slide, Christina. I believe so. Cara, anything else you want to leave us with before, if there's any other questions people have, please feel free to leave in the chat.
I would just say, if anyone has any announcements or updates, feel free to chime in. And if not, I would love to just keep chatting about, I would love to keep peppering our guests with questions about Starlight. But I want to make a moment to see if anybody has any other, anything else that they want to share, or any questions related to reopening. Reopening seems like a strange thing to call this now. I don't know. We should come up with a new term for it. No?
We do have a question about the future of calls. This Friday call, I should say.
Okay. Like, what are we doing with it?
Yeah, like, are we going
Okay.
I will say our next meeting will not be next Friday because of Labor Day weekend. So we'll be meeting for the following Friday on September 11th. And Cara, if you want to talk about what our ideas are for the fall/future. Yeah,
So we've been, from holidays and upcoming holidays and vacations and those kinds of things, kind of getting into a twice a month rhythm sort of organically. I think we're going to try to keep that moving forward. So you may see an update from us probably next week with what that schedule is. And then some of the topics that have come up, there are a few folks who want to have a theater conversation specifically around racial equity and kind of statements and policies that people are considering, different experiences that people have had trying to reopen and trying to reopen or trying to navigate some of what you all are talking about right now in terms of being equitable and thoughtful around partnerships and relationships with workers and actors and staff as well. So that's been a major topic. We also have been working on an updated version of the 2017 Performing Arts Facility Assessment that the city did, that was really looking at the supply and demand, or rather the mismatch of supply and demand of performing arts spaces for performance and rehearsal. And so we're doing an update on that in light of COVID, and that'll be something that we probably want to share back to this group as well and have a conversation about. So that's some of what's been on the table so far. But as always, if there's something that you think we should be covering or that you want to use this space for, really welcome suggestions or people raising their hand to participate, or even facilitate a conversation of within, you know, whatever is happening in their corner of the world. Any other questions, general questions? Okay. In that case, I would love to throw another question back to Catherine, Maurice, and Peter, and that's about the Starlight Square social contract. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how that came together, if you've used audience social contracts or agreements before, or if this is the first time, and if this is one of those things that you could imagine using into the future, and just like how are you taking stock of how audience members are responding and how kind of safe and secure they're feeling as they navigate the space?
So it's interesting you asked that, Cara. I'm thinking about creating an anti-racist social contract. So that's what's next. Long overdue. We haven't really used social contracts like this before. Although I have to say, I think Nick is on the call. He's our marketing director. As soon as COVID hit and we talked about doing anything again, you know, he mentioned we need to have a contract with patrons. That's the only way it's going to go forward. So we haven't really, that I can think of, used this before. It feels successful on our end so far. I mean, we get questions about it here and there. people seem grateful that we are doing that, that we have a contract, and that it's pretty spelled out. It's kind of long, but that's what's required. That's been my take on it so far. I don't know if Peter, you have other.
I feel like it's interesting because at the dance complex we have 7 studios, and often we've had to have this very a regular contract includes how you behave with each other. This is how we're going to treat each other. So it's kind of a values thing. It's somewhat safety. It's about it's contracted and expanded over the years about gender and use of bathrooms to leaving the studio 3 minutes before the end of the hour, and there's grace period. So we've always had something like that, and we're just about to publish and the safety protocols kind of remind me of it, this culture of community document that is like a living, breathing thing where people who use the dance complex can add their thoughts and questions to it, and then those questions and thoughts get absorbed and talked through, and it will now happen through Zoom calls throughout the fall. And then we adapt and keep adding to the protocols, editing and adding. And so when the safety protocols for this came through and COVID came up, of course, that adds a whole other ripple to it. It sometimes feels cumbersome, but at another point, it keeps boiling down to the most outrageous behavior you think somebody could have. And then you see exhibited in different parts of our country and different parts of Boston and Cambridge. You almost naming it then brings a common sense, a common use of the sense of being with each other. And so I'm very excited because it's just a new way to be with each other. It feels good and necessary right now.
And it really goes, the act of wearing a mask is not so much about your protection, but the protection of your community members, right? So I think this extends that ideal, and hopefully anybody who's coming to the space is already willing to, you have to really take ownership of the safety of everyone around you as much as they need to take ownership of the safety of your body. So, and I really love the idea of an anti-racist social contract. So can't wait to talk about that.
I think the other thing that I like about our social contract is that we also point out that many of our staff are BIPOC, and part of the social contract is that you need to understand that they are affected at a higher rate than you are, and you pledge to keep them safe in the way that we do too. So I think that's, to me, that again feels like that should be part of everything we do from now. You know what I mean? From here on, if we haven't been thinking about it enough, now's the time to change that and to really incorporate that kind of responsibility into all that we do.
And I guess a last question maybe we can end on is just, are there any other experiences or things that you're learning from this that you would want to take forward into kind of the quote unquote new normal, after, let's say Starlight ends however many months from now? What are some of the things that you've already been experiencing that you think you would want to take forward?
If I can just speak real briefly, just artistically, I think theater artists in particular are often given a script or given a role to play, but I've been moved and really impacted by giving these talented performers space to make the statement they want to make and talk about the things. There's some people that are talking about songs that they've always wanted to sing, and then there's this woman who identifies as biracial and is really taking this moment as a way to talk from a very pointed perspective that is not usually, it's so common in our society, but it's not usually the focus of narratives and storytelling. So, but when else would she have been given that opportunity? So I'm just always in awe of the power of giving artists space to create from an original perspective in the theater. Yeah,
I feel like I mentioned earlier, or Catherine did, about this Our Town grant for next year that we've collaborated on. They've taken the lead, Central Square Theater has, and and that could have happened, or not. I know Catherine and I have a martini now and again, and but this really drove it, and I feel like this overall interrupted time where we're interrupting patterns of being, everybody individually as well as organizationally. It's really good for stuff like this, because all of a sudden you start to question why you made the choices you did before, or why didn't we have a culture of community document, or why didn't people's voices, why weren't they illuminated before? So all of a sudden it just it gives me strength. If any of us are going to do all this work, we might as well get back to that revisited bucket list of, yes, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to highlight this, and we're going to work for the good versus others. So that feels really, really good, and I do appreciate Improv Boston and Catherine, the three groups coming together in a way that I know we wouldn't have, and getting to work with other folks too. So it's very good.
I agree. I think collaboration, we collaborate a lot anyway, but even with this level of collaboration, I mean, the work that Central Square Theater is presenting, we're not doing any of our own work. We're presenting other work. We're just making it possible in whatever way we can. So, we're working with the Porch, obviously, who's part of our family, the Arts Emerson, new rep. So we're really collaborating with lots of other groups to bring in work that makes sense for the moment that we're in, in terms of safety, one-person shows, that kind of thing, and then also shows that highlight the Black and Brown experience. So I'm just reminded that collaboration is great.
We have a few questions that have just come in. One from Deborah Cash: would love to hear more about fundraising during and after COVID and how to engage the non-governmental players.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Deborah. I mean, it's this conversation on Starlight is making me think about the non-governmental players of business and where they are in all of this, which is maybe not who you're talking about if you're talking about philanthropy. But I think it would be really interesting. The Boston Chamber has spoken out in support of arts and culture during this time, and how can we strengthen that conversation? Pulling even our own downtown bid into this and talking about the role of bids, I think would be really fascinating. But I don't know if that's what you're referring to or not. That's where my head is right now. Business, philanthropy, universities, all of the above. Yeah, I agree. Well, I see also that Ron mentioned the new NEFA initiatives, Public Art for Spatial Justice and Collective Imagination for Spatial Justice. Something that we could do is invite the different foundations or some representatives from some of these places to come and share how they are thinking about their grant making or programs that they do have. I know Kim Zito would be happy to join us and talk a little bit about those programs and what their intentions are. And Eva's volunteering herself to talk on behalf of TBF about what she's doing with the arts program there. Thanks, Eva.
And I think it might be fascinating to as we wrap up Starlight and other great projects that are happening, to share the story of that. How did the businesses in Central Square feel like they were appreciated? The tech world in Kendall Square is somewhat involved, and strategically so. We invited some people to our service organization meeting, not so to ask for advice, yes, but also for them to hear how effective things like Starlight are. So almost a kind of a little staging to introduce them to the idea and what the effects are, because there aren't a lot of success stories that are put forth. It's usually that the artist as beggar story. Let's highlight some of these stories that aren't that. That would be great.
One last question: how can ODA be in touch with the Front Porch? We provide audience members from the mental health community.
Visit our website, www.frontporcharts.org/contact. And there's our email address. Our email address is info@frontporcharts.org. Shoot us an email. We can start a conversation.
Great. I think that's it, Pascal.
Think so.
Right? Are you saying anything?
Peter just put a quick plug for everybody about the dance complex. Oh, letting us know about opening for studio rentals. So if anyone has questions or is interested, feel free to email Peter. Thanks, Peter, for that info.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks for the conversation. Really appreciate it. It's nice to have some back and forth. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks and send out this deck. And yeah, just thank you so much. It's great to hear about this project. Thanks for chiming in, Peter, Catherine, and Maurice.